Picture the story you have been told. A brave hunter finds an orphaned wolf cub, carries it home, raises it by the fire, and one day it follows him instead of running away. That is the first dog. It is a lovely story and almost certainly not what happened. Here is the problem with it. Wolves are not big dogs. A grown wolf is 40 kilos of predator with a bite that crushes bone, and people have raised wolf cubs from a few days old, hand-fed them, socialized them constantly, and the result is still a wolf. At around 2 years old, when it matures, it stops treating you as a parent and starts treating you as a rival. You do not tame that in one lifetime. You cannot, and yet the dog exists. It is the first animal we ever domesticated, petted, and it happened before farming, before pottery, before permanent villages. People with no crops and no fences somehow ended up living with a predator. So how? Start with what we can actually put a date on. In a quarry near Bonn in Germany, workers uncovered a grave containing 2 adult humans and the remains of a dog, buried together around 14,200 years ago. It is one of the oldest undisputed domestic dogs we have. But the interesting thing is not the burial, it is the teeth. Analysis of that animal showed it was young and that it had survived canine distemper, a viral disease that is often fatal. A puppy going through severe distemper cannot regulate its temperature, cannot feed itself properly, and needs warmth, water, and food supplied to it for weeks. There is no way that animal survives on its own. Somebody looked after a sick puppy for weeks and got nothing out of it, and then buried it with their own dead. Whatever this relationship was by that point, it was not just a working arrangement. Now go back further, and it gets murky fast. There are candidate skulls from caves in Belgium and from Przedmosti in the Czech Republic that are 30,000 years old or more, and specialists genuinely disagree about whether those are early dogs or simply unusual wolves. Genetics tells us the dog lineage split from the wolf lineage somewhere in a broad window between roughly 20 and 40,000 years ago, which is a long time before that German grave. And genetics also delivered a surprise. The wolves alive today are not our dog's ancestors. They are our dog's cousins. The population that gave rise to dogs is extinct. A large study published in 2022, sequencing dozens of ancient wolf genomes, found that dogs draw ancestry from more than one ancient wolf population, which suggests this did not happen once in one valley. It happened more than once. So back to the how, and the best answer we have inverts the whole story. Nobody went and got a wolf. The wolves came to us. The idea is usually credited to Ray and Lorna Coppinger, and it starts with something unglamorous. A human camp produces waste. Bones, scraps, guts, the parts of a carcass nobody wants. That is a reliable, concentrated food source sitting in the open, and it costs nothing to take. The only obstacle is nerve. Every wild animal has what is called a flight distance, the range at which it bolts when a human moves. A wolf with a long flight distance eats nothing at that camp. A wolf that can hold its nerve at 30 meters eats well. Then 20, then 10. Nobody is choosing anything here. The camp is simply feeding whichever animals are calmest night after night, generation after generation. And calm animals raise calm pups. That is not taming. That is selection, running by itself, with humans as the environment rather than the trainer. Now, does that actually work? Because it sounds too easy. There is a famous experiment on exactly this. Starting in 1959 in Siberia, Dmitry Belyaev and Lyudmila Trut bred silver foxes selecting for one single trait: how the animal reacted to an approaching human. Nothing else. Not size, not coat, not ears. Within a few generations, they had foxes that approached people, whined for attention, and licked hands. And along with the behavior came things nobody selected for: floppy ears, curly tails, white patches on the face, shorter snouts, breeding seasons that shifted. That cluster is called the domestication syndrome, and it shows up across an absurd range of domestic animals. One leading explanation is that all those tissues, the parts of the ear that hold it upright, pigment cells, parts of the face, and crucially the adrenal glands that drive fear responses, all develop from the same population of embryonic cells. Select for a calmer stress response, and you unavoidably drag the ears and the coat along with it. I should be fair here. That fox experiment has been criticized because the founding animals came from Canadian fur farms and had already been bred around humans for decades, so they were not starting from truly wild. The effect is real. The speed of it may be flattered. But apply the principle to wolves, and you get something remarkable. The tame animal does not just behave differently. It looks different. Softer face, smaller teeth, patchy coat, ears that flop. It stops looking like a threat. And then the relationship starts paying in both directions. A dog at a camp is an alarm system that never sleeps and smells a predator long before you do. On a hunt, dogs find animals you would never find and hold them in place. Studies of modern hunters working with dogs show returns for certain prey rising dramatically when the dogs come along. And a large warm animal sleeping against you on a cold night is not a small thing either. But the part I find genuinely extraordinary is what happened to the dog's face. Dogs read us in a way wolves do not. Point at something and a dog follows your finger. Wolves raised identically mostly do not. And in 2019, anatomists comparing dog and wolf heads found that dogs have a small muscle above the eye that wolves essentially lack. Its job is to lift the inner eyebrow. That is the movement that makes the pleading, wide-eyed expression every dog owner knows, and it triggers a caring response in humans. Dogs evolved facial muscle for talking to us. We selected it without ever knowing it existed. So nobody tamed the first wolf. There was no moment. There was a camp with rubbish, a population of animals with slightly different nerves, and enough thousands of years for the calmest of them to become something else. The wolf did not walk into the firelight because a human called it. It walked in because that was where the food was, and by the time anyone noticed, it had stopped being a wolf.